I think if I go to the gym like I'm an athlete, it's way
Yeah.
different than like I'm a washed up like narp walking into the gym to
No.
lift just to feel something kind of thing. Like
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of So Now What podcast, episode 3. And I'm super excited about this episode today. We've got Bridgette Schaal on the show, and she and I actually went to the same high school together. We were in different grades, so never really crossed paths, but very recently our paths crossed because social media, just because of two things that we're working on that are pretty similar with my podcast, talking about mental health and transitioning out of being an athlete, and then also what she's working on, which is this new company and brand for athletes, and creating a community for them when they no longer think that they're competing at that level, but still want a place to get workout programs or have a community with people who competed at a high level or just identify as an athlete. So a little bit of background on Bridgette. She grew up in Northern Virginia, where we both went to high school, and did gymnastics for her entire life. And then she went on to compete in college for SUNY Brockport in New York. And then after that, she did the classic, you graduate from college, go get a job. And she ultimately ended up getting laid off and just really filled her time with working out and exercising. And there came a day where it sort of clicked with her, like, let's turn this into some sort of career, because she obviously was incredibly passionate about it and just passionate about helping other people who are going through something similar. So she coaches gymnastics now, but now she's really focused on this new business adventure, this new brand and community that she is hoping to take off. So really awesome conversation. We just kind of go off the rails and talk about everything. So I'm going to let Bridgette tell her story, and we'll get right into our conversation with Bridgette Schaal. Look at us. Look at we're doing the damn thing.
I know, I'm so psyched to be here. I bought like podcast equipment so randomly, like in like a manic moment of motivation like 2 years ago, and this is my first chance to use it. So I'm super
nice. So let's talk a little bit about what you're working on right now, and then we'll backtrack of like you growing up.
I got laid off in September from a tech job, and I just kind of did nothing. But work out. Like I worked out every single day, like a million times a day. And I didn't work. I didn't like socialize. Like all I did to leave my house was like go to the gym and then come back. And it kind of got me thinking after like a couple of months. I was like, why don't I actually just try and capitalize on this? So that's when I kind of started to take a little bit of a dive towards personal training in terms of business. And I realized niche wise, I was trying to make something happen with like training women and trying to figure out who I could speak to the most. And this sounds awful, but like speaking to women, like being able to speak as a woman isn't necessarily like a unique experience. Like, and so many of these fitness coaches and these personal trainers are like, oh, I train women to like lose belly fat, or I help women like do XYZ to their body. And like none of it really felt right for me. And I was trying to figure out what I have to say to a unique audience that actually would make an impact and land and maybe go somewhere. And I started talking to some of my friends, and I realized that like being a quote former athlete is like 910% of my identity, if even just from growing up and being a gymnast, or the fact that I was working out twice every day, like for fun, like just because. And I kind of realized that I was like, I have a lot to say on that. And then I started thinking through, kind of what we were just talking about in terms of like being an athlete. And that's a huge part of my identity. And I feel like I lost that and then got it back, and then lost it again and got it back. And I'm like trying to understand what all that means. And I'm like, there's so many other people experiencing this. Yeah. And I kind of just wanted to start a conversation about it. So I realized business wise, what I wanted to do was create some kind of resource. I mean, it's all in the works right now, but resource, program, brand that is geared specifically towards athletes who are either making the transition, have already made the transition, and just kind of open up the dialogue in terms of, like mentally all the thought processes that you go through during that transition, in terms of your health, your mental health, your day to day, like how you view yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of creating something that, people, when they leave organized sports, that they can look to and say, hey, like there's some direction here. Here's like a community of people that understand that, and, be able to look to something and join it,
Yeah.
or talk to someone and kind of help them navigate that transition with someone else. That was super long-winded. Oh my goodness.
No, but I feel like your idea there, I mean, it parallels to sort of like exactly what I've been wanting to talk about with this podcast. And it's that idea of your community that you've lost. And it's not just like your identity, because I know we've focused a lot of like, we've identified as an athlete, but on top of that, I know we talked about this, we called before the podcast. I feel like I'm going to say that a million times, like when we talked on our phone call. But what we talked about was like, also there's that layer of losing a community too, especially if you played a team sport, or even like you coming from sort of an individualized sport with gymnastics, but still you're part of a team, you're part of other athletes going through the same tough shit together, and you lose that. So your idea is there, like, even if you don't have everything fleshed out, I think it's something that a lot of people are going to be like, damn, I wish that existed right when I got out of sports, or I'm so glad that's going to exist, because I will for sure use it, because so many of us are going through this same struggle, even if we stopped playing last year or 10 years ago. I feel like everyone's on a different, like time frame of their journey out of sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think too that it's kind of one of those things that, because really like people aren't talking about it, you don't even realize that that's what you're going through. Like,
yeah.
I feel like for years, I feel like I'm just now looking back and being like, oh, well, it's because I wasn't doing gymnastics every single day. Like, that's why I felt XYZ. And it's just, there was never a moment like anywhere near after I retired where I was like, oh, I probably feel this way because I don't have anywhere to go, because I
Yeah.
usually go to practice every single day. And
Yeah.
it's just strange. Like, I just feel like no one is talking about it, but we're all experiencing it. And it's just like
Mm-hmm.
a really weird like sensation.
And
Yeah.
and I think what you're sort of describing is like the delayed reaction too, because I know for me, towards the end of my career, I had gotten injured beginning of my senior year. So it was very like drastic. You're done playing, but I was still around it enough. And then when I was out of college, you get that honeymoon phase of you're post college and you're getting a job and you don't notice the transition yet, because
Yeah.
this whole new world's exciting. And then for me personally, this might be a different experience for everyone, but it was such a delayed reaction. Like you're saying, like I didn't even realize what I was going through until 2 or 3 years later. I'm like, oh, I'm sort of losing my community. I'm moving to a different city where I no longer went to college, and I'm no longer near my teammates and those friends. And that's when it really hits you. It's like, oh, damn, I don't have that structure anymore.
Yeah.
So I know, I mean, we'll probably get into this, but post playing, when you're so used to a training program or a plan, you see so many former athletes go and do like marathon training or do
Yeah.
something that's like very structured, because that's what we're used to.
Well, and actually something that kind of occurred to me when I was thinking through this before we jumped on is like, I actually, when I was psyched to retire. Like, I was so happy.
Which
It
not
was,
a lot of people say that too, which like I'm
yeah.
proud of you for even saying something like that. People are going to be like, oh, I was heartbroken. Like you feel the need to say that. But anyway,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, like, we're all adults. Like, we understand. Obviously, I was sad to not be able to do gymnastics anymore, but I was so fucking psyched to not have to go to practice every single day. And like, I
Yeah.
could just go to the bar at 4, like a normal college student.
Yeah.
Like, just, like
Yeah.
there was so many different emotions, but like truly the number one was like, I'm just so happy to not have an obligation anymore. And
Yeah.
then you're at this high, and then like very slowly, like you said, like it's all super delayed. You come down, and once you're down, you're like,
Oh shit.
like what now? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
now what? Like, I
So
don't know
now
what to
what?
do. Yeah. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like, I'm 26, so I've been out of gymnastics for 4 years, and I'm just now like, what do I like to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are my hobbies? What are some things that are like interesting to me? Because I feel like again, it's so delayed in terms of just like, well, I don't have to go to practice, so now I can go to happy hour every day. Like, and you
Mm-hmm.
ride that high for a while, and you're like living with friends, and now I'm actually an adult and live alone. And I'm like, what do I actually do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
I was just thinking about this the other day. I'm like, wait, I'm at an age where I can, if I wanted to tomorrow, I can completely change what I'm into. Like, I no longer need to be tied to this thing. And that's the first time I actually feel like I've had this thought, because past few years post soccer, I've felt the need to like really stay tied to this identity because, again, so proud of it. And I just loved being an athlete. And now working in the sport, it's always been something I'm tied to. But I'm like, it hit me like tomorrow, I could completely change what I'm interested in. I just haven't let myself have those thoughts yet of like, you could explore something different. Like, what if you want to go be an artist? I mean, I know I would need
Yeah.
skills for that, but what if you want to go be an actress or something like that? Like, you can change those things. And it just now occurred to me, I'm 5 years post college career, and I'm like, oh, I can change and explore new things, but I don't think I've allowed myself to do that because I've been so fighting that identity that I want to stay tied to. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. And I think it's like, so I just recently started coaching gymnastics again. And it's, I didn't for years, and it was really great taking a break from it. But when I first graduated, my first full-time job was coaching. I was like a head level 5 through 8 coach for this gym in my hometown. And when I stopped coaching, that's exactly, I was like, I feel scared to not be tied to gymnastics anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, it's going to take away from the 23 years that I was like enveloped in it. That's insanity. But like, it's exactly what it is. I'm like, if I'm not tied to gymnastics, then like, what am I tied to? I'm just like floating in the ether. Like,
yeah, like
so
what am I doing here?
Stupid. I'm like, this is very strange. But getting back into it, it's been really, I mean, healing sounds like a really intense word for it, but healing in a way where now I think of gymnastics, I think of like myself and then gymnastics. And like, I was a gymnast, like, but it's not totally attached to me, but I am we're still thinking through it. But in terms of like not doing it for a while, it doesn't take away from the fact that I was a gymnast, and doesn't take away like my attachment to gymnastics, but being able to get back to it in a healthy way without like fully defining my entire existence behind it is kind of a wild experience that I wasn't anticipating, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. So you feel more at peace being around it then than you thought you would, or are you still feeling, is it different than you?
Well, I mean, I'm like so in my element in the gym. Like coaching gymnastics is truly like what I really love to coach gymnastics so much. And I'm fine with it being, but I'm not like a gymnastics coach the same way that I was when I went from gymnast to gymnastics coach. And like, that was everything that I was and everything that I did, etc. Now I'm like, I coach gymnastics because it's fun and I like to do it. And I like working with the kids, and it's like a fun sport that I love. And that's it. Like, that's where we draw the line, and that's okay. That doesn't make me any less a gymnast or any less like involved with the sport, or that doesn't take away that piece that I identify with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I the reason I ask the whole like feeling at peace around it is because I think for me, when I worked in women's sports, I don't want to say like I went back into it too soon, because the job itself was a dream job and it came with a lot of ups and downs. We don't need to get into all of it, but I was more surprised at how the pros and cons list of that job. I was surprised at how many more of the cons in terms of how hard it was for me to actually be around the sport and not be playing it. When I thought like pre-accepting, like once I accepted the job, I'm like, this is going to be amazing. I'm going to get to be around the sport again and it's all going to feel great. But once I got around it and I was on the sidelines, and not only was I not like a coach or even a sub, I was just an employee. I'm at the practices, but I'm so close to the sport yet not playing. That was actually so much harder for me than I realized, because I think I talked about this on another episode, and I would watch the women at practice, and not that I thought I could even compete at that level, but there was a part of me that looked back in college or even high school. I'm like, damn, I wish I would have tried harder, believed a little bit more in myself, so I maybe could have gotten to that level. I just never saw myself getting there. But once I worked around it, I was like, damn, maybe I could have if I just worked a little harder. And so those thoughts of, I don't want to say regret, but I did have some regret just being around it, and it was very hard. And I felt a little bit more at peace actually leaving it. And now I work in men's soccer, which is still I get to be around the sport, but it's not the same feeling of like, oh, I could be out there, because it's just different genders. But
the
gender conversation. But
I honestly hadn't thought about it that way in terms of like, I feel like you say regret, but like resent kind of like sits with me also.
I resent myself. I'm like, why didn't I try harder?
My God, be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, well, I mean, something else I think about too is when people ask me, like, because you were a D1 soccer player, when people ask me, like, oh, you did gymnastics in college, like, what division? I'm like, oh, Division 3. Like, as if it's
Other
not
people
like,
react that way, or you
no,
say that?
I
You
like
say it that way.
self-deprecate out of the
Mm,
gate. And I'm like, oh, it was just Division 3. As if like doing any level of a college sport is not like bonkers, and gymnastics of
yeah.
all things too, because there's like not a lot of gymnastics programs in the country, like Division 3 also. There's only 6 Division 3. Well, I think there's another one. There's like around 6 to 8 like Division 3 schools like with gymnastics programs.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's insane. And I don't know why my brain went there, but in terms of like resenting myself for it. I'm like, I know that I
Mm,
could have done D1, but I went to
yeah.
D3. And if I had
Mm,
just worked harder, I would
mm,
have gone to D1. But like I had a great experience at Division 3. But I'm like, well, in this conversation, I could have said that I was a D1 athlete. And it's just so
mm.
stupid.
Interesting. Yeah.
Like the resent. I'm like, I just like if I could go back and punch my 16-year-old self in the face and be like, go do another set, like I would.
Interesting. It's tough to not to like try to force yourself out of those thoughts, and you don't want to live with regret or resentment, but they're natural thoughts, and you don't want to live in that negativity of like what if I tried a little bit harder, but you can't avoid it. I don't want to shift too many gears, but I at least want to give some context. Like when you started doing gymnastics, how old were you?
I probably was like still in diapers. Like I
Oh,
was probably like one, like a year and a half, and I probably did
yeah.
my first like mom, like parent and taught class.
Oh,
Um,
fun.
but I have two older sisters who did gymnastics. So like I was always in the gym. So it just kind of like naturally happened. But I
Mm,
started competing at like a competitive, like they do call it JO, which is Junior Olympic, like a competitive level in JO. I think probably like when I was six, like 6 or 7, I think is the age that you have to be when you start. But yeah, so I mean, like my entire life and like my whole family is just like surrounded by it.
yeah. Okay, I'm gonna bring up the Stick It reference. Or I have plenty of them, but love that movie so much.
Also love that movie.
What were your practices like?
As a teenager, like I would practice Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday for 4 hours, Tuesdays
Each?
each, yeah. And Tuesdays we'd have like a 2 hour conditioning. Like they hired a former D1 basketball coach to come and train us for 2 hours on Tuesday. It was so miserable. Oh my
Oh
God, it
my
was the worst.
God.
We had Fridays off and Sundays off. Unless we
Wow.
were competing obviously on the weekend, but
Mm,
and then and during the summer, so that's like school year, and then during the summer it's Monday through Friday for 4 hours every morning from 9 to 1.
wow.
um yeah, it was a lot, like, but I mean, again, like the program that I was in, that was on like probably like the mid level.
Mm,
There are a lot of programs in Northern Virginia in particular, like those girls practice 40 hours a week easily, like
wow.
just they don't go to school, like they, yeah, absolutely are homeschool, they practice twice a day. Like it wasn't anything like that, but it was definitely a lot. Like it's every day after school, right?
Yeah. And that's so intense. And half of the kids are probably wanting to do it, and half of them are like the parents wanting their kids to do
Oh,
it and go to the Olympics. And
absolutely. And like my friends and I talk about this all the time. So I grew up with the same girls. Like I'm still in the same circle of friends that I've done gymnastics with since I was 10, because you
that's
spend
fun.
30 hours a week with people, like you become friends like
Oh
just
yeah.
by default.
Right.
And we always joke like if you bled on the same bars, like we have to be friends.
Shared
But
blood.
yeah, so like I would say probably up until you're like 13, you're doing it because you're like, I love gymnastics, or like your parents are dropping you off. And then from that point, you're like, well, every day I get to hang out with my friends for 4 hours. And it kind of
Yeah.
sucks, but like it's fun at least.
Yeah. And for you, was most of your like even like I want to say pre-college time, you loved it? Like it was that it's sort of just you started to fall in love with it, or was there ever a point where you wanted to quit and it was too much? Because that sounds like a lot for a kid, especially starting so young.
Absolutely. I wanted to quit constantly. It was like, yeah, I mean, so further back, like when I was in eighth grade, I got hurt all the time between sixth grade to eighth grade. Like I fractured my kneecap twice, and
Oh,
yeah,
how?
I fell. Like so
Oh,
at meets the mats are really hard. And like, because there's concrete in a lot of these meets where they put all the equipment in. Yeah, it's like big conference centers. And then they
yeah.
put the meets on top of the concrete, or they put the
Yeah.
mats on top of the concrete. And, you're flipping onto it. And I landed on my knees one day. And I didn't know until weeks later, but like I landed on my knees and I fractured my kneecap. Yeah, I did that 2 times. It was
How did
super.
you not know till weeks later?
Well, I knew it hurt, but like I was such a whiner. So if I was like, ow, my knee hurts, they're like, shut up, like go, get on the beam. Like everything hurts on you all the
You're
time. And
you're literally
eventually,
doing stuff with broken kneecaps.
truly, I mean, it's just not as dramatic as it sounds. Like it was like I think the piece that fractured off was like that big.
Any piece of kneecap that is not attached does not sound right.
It wasn't great. I'm not gonna lie. It really hurt. And like I was telling my coaches that I was like, guys, like this time I promise you, like
This is it.
something is not right. Like
They're
this
like,
doesn't
Bridgette,
feel good. They're like,
no.
shut up. They've known me since I was 3. They're like, this girl's so annoying. Get on the beam. Like you're driving me nuts. And then finally I convinced my mom. I was like, you have to take me to the doctor. Like this is
Mhm.
not normal. And yeah, I was in like a giant, you ask anyone who went to St. Tim's that knew me, I wore like this giant, like ankle to top of my thigh knee brace that I
Oh,
had to walk around in all summer and like half of the fall.
that's
Like,
miserable.
oh, it was horrific.
Oh no.
It was
How old were
just,
you?
I
Middle school?
was 12, I
Oh my
think.
God.
Yeah, I was really young.
Not the
Um,
pool party fit you want in the
No, it
summer.
was not it. Terrible. And I sucked. Like I was 12, so I'm not at the beach. Like I'm not wearing it. So I went back
Yeah.
to the doctor and like we know we can take x-rays of your body. Like we know
Yeah.
you're not wearing it.
Yeah.
So then once I finally got cleared from that, I actually ended up having this like really strange bone disease in my elbow from gymnastics. So like on vault, like you have to have your elbows completely
Hmm.
straight, and it was causing like a lack of blood flow. I had to go in and cut it out. Um, such drama. But that's when I was
Wow.
in eighth grade. And I took an entire year off because my parents were like, yeah, we're like not paying for you to go and just
Mm.
stretch for like 4 hours. Because obviously like, I couldn't do anything. And
Yeah.
like, but my dad actually passed away the summer after eighth grade. And I walked into the gym a month later and was like, I want to come back. My coaches who have truly like known me since I was a baby, like they came to the funeral and they said like whenever if you ever want to come back, like you always have a home here. And I walked in like a month later and it became something different for me, like in that summer,
Yeah.
obviously. Like I wasn't going there every day because I was like, gymnastics is so fun. I love gymnastics. It was like I'm showing up every single day because I like have to have something to put whatever I'm
Yeah.
feeling. And that's kind of what it all became. And yeah,
Wow.
like I had my friends, so that was fun, but it truly, that was not the motivation. And I constantly wanted to quit, but I knew I never would because like, then what? Like
Hmm.
there wasn't anywhere else for me to throw whatever it is that I was like, that was going on in my head. Yeah. The drama.
Wow.
So sorry. Didn't mean
I
to
mean,
take it in there.
no, no. I mean, I remember going, I mean, at PVI and hearing the story about your family and your dad, and I can't imagine how
Really?
difficult that, yeah.
Oh, wild. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I I obviously like didn't want to bring it up if we didn't want to
Yeah,
talk
no,
about
it's
it,
important. Yeah, it's okay.
but I was heartbroken for you guys, and that must have been really, really, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, but it's interesting and powerful to hear how gymnastics, that shifted for you and what it meant for you. And that really gives so much more context about how and why it's so difficult for you now to be out of the sport because of how important it became for you. On top of just being an athlete, like it became your community and an outlet because of this huge thing that happened in your life. So it adds another layer that so many other people probably can't even relate to, but it makes a lot of sense.
I honestly hadn't really thought, I mean, not that I hadn't thought about it in that way, but I didn't think about it in that way in terms of like transition wise. Thank you for saying
Mm.
that, by the way. That was very nice of you to say. But yeah, I guess I didn't really, honestly, like you've given me something to think about. Truly. I mean, because I think about it like when I was doing it, I'm like, yeah, that makes complete sense. Like, and it makes complete sense too why, like seasonal sports never really stuck with me because, if I'd been doing a seasonal sport and like that huge tragic or like traumatic moment happens, you're like, I guess I just have to wait until the next season. Like, it makes complete sense that I would be in a sport that is like, it takes up 98% of your entire existence.
It's a distraction, but it can be a healthy outlet too. Like it's not necessarily a negative thing to call something a distraction if, you're going through something really difficult and that's your outlet. I mean, and so many athletes describe their sport as their outlet. And so many of my episodes I've had in the past, I mean, people who've opened up about like eating disorders and mental health stuff, but they're like, I could escape a lot of my mental health struggles because of my sport. And it just allowed me to be free and not think about what I'm going through. And I'm with my teammates and it's such like a freeing space. And so when people talk about like getting out of their sport and they're like, oh, and people who don't understand necessarily like, oh, like go find something new. But you don't realize how much of a tie it is to you because of maybe something you've gone through while you were playing. And it just became so much even more latched onto who you were.
Yeah, I genuinely hadn't thought of that before. Like in that context, which sounds insane. But what you said about it being an outlet, I think is interesting. And it only makes me think about when we think of someone having an outlet for something, I feel like we like exclusively associate that with like a positive, And I feel like in that sense, and maybe this is something I had to think through with gymnastics as well, is like I'm so sorry, my cat is like,
oh my God, cameo. We'll do a cat cameo.
if I went and grabbed him, he would run away. I feel like we don't necessarily talk as much about like, sure, it was an outlet, but and there were like the positive is that it was an outlet, but what kind of negative like effects, like what other negative things can come out of that, or what negative things are we discounting because it's the outlet? And I feel like that is kind of where there's conversations about like eating disorders and all those things, all those connotations that come with sports that we don't necessarily spend enough time thinking about.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I know people talk a lot about gymnastics and it being such a sport that is unlike any other, where obviously you're utilizing your body so much, but there's also an element of what's the word? Like aesthetics of what you look like. And like, it's very performance based and how you look and what you can do with your body. So not every sport's like that. So what was your experience like around all of that?
So I genuinely can say like day to day didn't have very many negative experiences in that way. And there's a lot of people who can't say that truly. Like there's so many of my friends that I did college gymnastics with who were like, my coach weighed me in and, constantly being called fat, etc. Like because the program that I was in was not crazy. It was, and because I'd been there for my whole life, it wasn't necessarily about that. The only time I would say growing up, I think when I was like 17, when your body starts to change, and I'd gotten my license. So I went to Dunkin' Donuts like every single day. Like the freedom was too much to handle. That conditioning coach that they had hired, this is the only time that anyone has ever said anything to me about my body as a teenager. She told me that I should stop eating so much sugar because then I would look better. And yeah. And I said to her, I said, I like took it in and I like walked and I was like, okay. And then I walked away and then I started like seething a little bit, like as like teenage girls do. And I kind of, the next time I saw her, I was like, you should be really careful who you say that to, because I don't care. I'm going to like continue to go to Dunkin' Donuts every single day, likely. But there are girls who will take that so to heart and it will not be taken the way that I know you intended it. And that I think is typically the experience. Like there's a lot of coaches out there that will be really hard on girls for what they eat, and coaches are kind of crazy talking to the parents about nutrition and what they need to eat before practice and what they can't eat. Truly not my experience. I would say in college, has to be expected. We're older and we care a lot more about what we look like. There was a lot more dialogue about it. Everyone definitely felt a lot more comfortable commenting on other girls' bodies. And For context, from my own experience, my freshman year, I found out that I'd had a back injury that was like pretty debilitating, and it was really painful. It's called spondylolisthesis.
Wow.
It essentially is like a fracture in your lower back that once the fracture like doesn't heal, your vertebrae will slip, and it's like a permanent, like you have to get surgery to fix it, which isn't necessarily I mean, it's painful, but like the most painful part is that when your vertebrae slips, like your discs will herniate. So, and that, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, is like the worst pain I've ever felt in my life.
Oh, back
But
stuff
that
freaks
is,
me out so much.
it's, yeah, I don't recommend to like look into it.
I was thinking about it, but thank you.
It's gross. But that is like my discs were herniating my freshman year, which is like, that's what I can't, I can work through the pain of like the fracture, but the pain of the disc is too much. So I was only competing one event, and I was my freshman year in college. So I have the dining hall every single day, and I'm like not working out as much, and I put on weight. Like it just, at the time it was obviously really frustrating, and it was clear. Like it was probably one of the only times in my life it was super clear that my body was changing like in a way that I just like couldn't control it anymore. And the older girls on the team would talk about it. Like we'd go to a meet and we'd sit in the hot tub at the hotel overnight, and you see people's eyes on you, like that people are looking at you, like the older girls on the team. And it's it was all very passive. And my coach, who I love dearly, and he will never listen to this, hopefully, he's like an older man, like he'll make comments about girls. And it took until my senior year, and I was captain my senior year, so I was very close with him. I'd be like, you can't say that. Like you can't say, we're beyond the time in life where you should feel so comfortable freely commenting on anyone's body, let alone like a young woman's body.
Good for you.
I mean, he didn't listen, but
Great.
Effort was there.
Planted a little seed.
Yeah, I mean, old men are the way that they are, and they're just gonna be that way probably. But I think that like it was different in college. Like it was different in terms of you knew people were talking about it, but it wasn't like, it was D3, like we weren't weighing in XYZ. Like if you weren't fit, you probably weren't competing. And like it was very black and white in that way. But I mean, I had made a video the other day on my Instagram talking about like my weight my senior year.
Yeah, I love that video. It's really good.
Oh, I think it's important because we had kind of talked about last week about like I hate using the term like conventionally thin people, but like
it's a way to say it. Yeah.
A normal, like a quote normal weight, like that you'd see on social media, is like girls like, oh, I'm 120 pounds. I'm like, I don't even know of a time in my life when I was 120 pounds and I had double digits, like in my age. There's no way. Like we don't even need to unpack that today, but all that to say that like my senior year, it was probably the only time like I wouldn't eat breakfast, and then I would eat like a wrap with a piece of cheese, turkey, and like spinach on it for lunch. And then I'd have like quinoa and chicken or salmon for dinner. And like, that's literally all I ate.
And you were working out?
And I was going to practice every day. And then I was going to the gym and running. I would do like an 8-minute mile, because that was which gymnasts don't run. So it was just like, I was like, wow, I'm running so much. Like I ran a mile like every other day. Or I would do sprints. Like I would do 10 sprints and then do whatever conditioning it was that we had to do that day. But yeah, every day. And like when I got to that, people are like, oh, you look so great. I'm like, thanks.
The external here.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, it's working. This must be right. Like, this is what I'm doing. And like, I look back at pictures of myself. I'm like, I looked great, but like, I was so hungry all the time. Like, but exactly to your point, like I would say I wanted to be like 100, and I was like, I want to be 140 pounds. I can't be 140 pounds. I'm 5'5". I'm probably like in between 5'5" and 5'6". Like I'm not tall.
Yeah.
I cannot be 140 pounds and be healthy.
Yeah.
Both cannot exist. Like, and I didn't realize that. And that was probably but all the girls on the team, they're like, oh my gosh, like I'm like 120, 130. I'm like, bitch, I could never. Like I could.
And that's important to get to that point where you can tell yourself these things, and because you fight it for so long of like, I will just be happier if I'm just a little bit smaller. I was just
Mhm.
talking to my mom about this the other day because I still go through the ups and downs, and I have bad body image days, and I still have those lingering thoughts of like, oh, if I just lost 5 pounds, like maybe I'll be a little bit happier. And
Mhm.
I told my mom, and I'm like, I'm 27 now, and I'm like, I don't want to look back at my 20s and realize that I spent the whole time just trying to be a smaller version of myself. And she was like,
Yeah.
say that out loud again. I'm like, okay. Because I mean, I've grown up as like the tallest girl in class and tallest girl on the team. So I'm
Mhm.
always tall, and I've totally accepted the fact I can't change that. And so
Yeah.
there's been a long time where I'm like, well, I might as well try to get skinny. It's so hard. And I can't imagine coming from a sport where it's like you see people in leotards every day and you're hardly wearing any clothes. It's like your
It's
body's always
weird.
on display.
Yeah. It's really strange. And like even when I was exactly what you're saying, like even when I was that like not eating, fit, 148 pound, probably the thinnest I've been as an adult, I was still I was still going to be one of the bigger girls. And I just like
Mm,
could bigger. Like I was
mm.
still muscular as all hell and like still standing. I was 5'5" and I was one of the tallest girls on the team. Like it's
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Like something that I had to kind of teach myself in gymnastics is that that's fine because that's why I'm good. I was really good at floor. I was
Yeah.
really good at vault and like I'm really muscular. You have to have a lot of power. That's why I was able to be good at that. And I just kind of stood in the mirror and I was like, you look this way so you can be good, man. Like go to sleep, stop thinking about it, let it go. Like it doesn't
It's
matter. It
like,
doesn't matter. Yeah. I'm like, eat,
yes.
eat something and go to bed. It's
Yes.
wild. But yeah, I won't deny like that was tough. And even now, people look at me and this sounds bad, but someone was like, you look like you'd be a softball player. Like you look
Mm,
like you'd be like a rugby player. And I'm like,
mm.
I understand you're trying to be nice, but it's really not coming across that way. And I'm like, oh, I was a gymnast. They're like, oh, you look too tall and big to be a gymnast. I'm like,
Oh,
first of
the
all,
comments people
shut
make.
the fuck up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know why you felt so comfortable saying that to me, first of
Yeah.
all. Second of all, like, what does that even mean?
Right. I recently have been getting like the similar comments of you think people think that they're making a compliment, and they're like, oh, like I will wear when I wore biker shorts one day. I'll never forget this. I'm walking around Chicago and I was wearing biker shorts to go to volleyball, and this old man on his bike standing next to me, and he's like, oh, you look like you work out. And I'm like, you're just revealing that you're like looking at my body, and then your
Mhm.
first thought is to make a comment on it. I'm like, ew, please stop.
I I literally it will never make sense to me. Like or guys who are like, "Oh, like I love your muscles." I'm like,
Yeah, it's like
"I have a degree. I have a job." So many way cooler things about me than like how much I lift. I mean, thank you. But also shut the fuck up. Like
yeah.
sorry for I
Keep
hope
a comment. No,
oh
you're
my
good.
God. I was like, what? Like, and that's always been like, and I imagine we'll get into this, but like, oh my God, my entire life. And I've grown to like appreciate it about myself. And I appreciate that
Mm,
people appreciate about me, but it's always just been like, you've always been so strong. Like you always have just had so much muscle. You've always been that way. I'm like, why is the only thing people care to comment about me, like 99% of the
yeah.
time, have to do with what I've looked like for my whole life?
Yeah. I don't want to say any names, but there's a trainer from our high school that he gave me the nickname Trunks, Tree Trunks.
Shut up.
And for
I
four
hate
years, I was Trunks. And I'm like, you think that's okay?
like yeah, that's what a teenage yeah, you think that's okay. You think like a teenage girl isn't gonna go home and like literally be like,
Right.
you're a big girl. Like how
Yes.
does any get
This
make it
is
make sense?
this is how old was I? 13 years ago,
Oh,
and I still think about it. I'm like, it all goes back to this leeway that people think that they have to talk about women's body or just anyone's body, any
yeah.
gender's body. But I want to go back to what you said is like looking in the mirror and be like, this body that I am in right now allowed me and got me to do all of these amazing things. And it's so hard to let that be your first thought because our first thought is to think of something negative when we're looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
But reminding yourself, like, this body that I'm in has let me play a college sport or let me go to workout class this
Mhm.
morning or go for a run.
Yeah. It's I also think too, like I think going along with that, the people that I have in my life now they appreciate that about me in a different way. Like they
Mhm.
actually appreciate it about me. Whereas
Yeah.
people on the street or like people who don't really know you are just like commenting on it to comment on it.
Yeah.
Whereas like my friends are like, oh no, I think it's so cool that you're strong. And they make it like
Yeah.
this part of like, no, I think that's like a cool thing about you instead of it
Mhm.
being like, oh, like it's so hot that you have muscles. Like it's so, you must lift X amount. Like I feel like it's kind of drawing the line between like the intention behind what people
Mhm.
are saying
Mhm.
and just kind of it's received much
Yeah.
differently by the people who you're like the people that actually want to appreciate this
Yeah.
about me, like actually do, and in a way that is not disgusting or offensive.
Yeah, because they know you and they're not just making comments about you being strong. They're associating you being strong with being a really hard worker, someone who's
Mm-hmm.
really determined, someone who sets
Yeah.
goals, and they associate things about your personality and your values with you being strong versus, like you were saying, just the outward physical part of being strong that some stranger makes a comment on
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you
There's a
don't.
lot more attached to it. Like
Yeah.
there's some depth there,
Yes.
like some humanization,
Yeah.
at least.
And the one other thing I want to comment or say about this is I was in therapy this last week, and I made a comment of like how my body is changing negatively, like now that I'm no longer a college athlete. And she's like, what do you mean by changing negatively? I'm like, like I feel like I'm not as toned and like I have belly fat that I didn't have before, and like the abs are gone. And she's like, that's you define like putting a label of negative and positive, and that's you defining that. When if you step back, it's just your body's changing and it's just evolving, and it's you being a human being, and you're labeling it as negative. It doesn't have to be a negative thing, it's just a change. And like, what does that say about our bodies if it's not changing at all? You're not
Yeah.
living your life. I thought that she totally called me out. I'm like, you right, you
Yeah,
right.
yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, it does like make complete sense. And I feel like you could write a dissertation on like where that thought process comes from. But I feel
Yeah.
like even, and I'm sure you felt this way, like as an athlete as well, like in soccer, if your body's changing, then like your performance is probably changing. And
Mm-hmm.
like there's again, like there's so many different things attached to that. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like out of a sport, I'm like, well, if my body's changing, then that must mean that I'm doing something wrong or that I'm not
Mm-hmm.
able to do something anymore the way that I was able to do it before.
Yes.
I'm not the same. Like
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
different and like that's bad,
Right.
which is very interesting. Without over the past year, something I've really, really tried to work on in myself is understand that like my physical appearance, number one, and even like working out, sometimes I don't have the space or the energy to prioritize that. And
Mm.
there are going to be consequences. And the consequences are that I am not going to have a totally fit, toned body. Like, but my body is like taking care of itself and taking care of me in the way that it has to in that time.
Mm.
And, you know, I didn't lose any weight. Like I gained weight over this year, like because I was working out so much, but I totally recomped everything. And I looked back on those pictures of myself from when I just moved to Charleston like a year and a half ago. And when I moved here, I was coming out of like a living situation that I was not happy in. I hated my job, but I truly was like, I woke up every day, I worked, I ate, I drank wine, I went to bed. And like my body absolutely reflected this. But I
Mm.
was like, who cares? Because I was getting through. I did what I needed to do to get through what I was getting through. And now that I'm here, like
Yeah.
I can breathe and I have a lot more space in my brain to prioritize, working out and physical appearance and physical health. So as hard as it is to accept when our body changes, I feel
Mm.
like it's the mindset very much needs to be like, but I'm still taking care of myself the way that I can right now. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
and like that's the end of it. Like I can't let that thought go any further or else it's a total shit
Mm-hmm.
show. But like once I just stop it there, I'm like, then that's it. And then tomorrow's a new day and I'm gonna do whatever I have the capacity to do. And that's all.
Mm-hmm. And it's so cliche, but like just listening to your body and what it needs. And your body
Absolutely.
needed to rest and it needed some wine and it needed to take a break
Yep.
versus we're not used to doing this. As an athlete, you wake up and you push yourself. If you're not feeling it, you still push yourself because
Yeah.
you have to hit a certain goal or you have to, perfect a certain move or whatever. But
Yeah.
we're not used to the whole like, wait, let me like take a little like debrief on how I'm feeling and take a rest day if I need to. It's so foreign. It's so foreign, but it's so beneficial when you actually do listen to it.
Oh my God. And it's still like I know that, but even still, after I got laid off, like I said, I worked out twice, like every single day. I go
Mm-hmm.
kickboxing and then I go lift in the afternoon every day, like an absolute lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
And I did this for like 2 months. And then finally I like my sister's asking me, like, what are you doing for work? And I'm like, bro, like, I don't know what I want to do. Like, I feel like this is my time to do something, but I just don't know. And she's like, why don't you just like chill? Why don't
What does that mean?
why don't you just like do nothing? Like and just you haven't like taken a break. And I was like, no, I haven't worked. And she's like, no, like, why don't you just like go sit on your couch and like stare at the wall and just like be alone with your thoughts? And I was like, I don't know how to do.
That's so
But then I
scary. Yep.
dude, I swear to God though, like I started this like fantasy genre series and then that's all I did for an entire week was read. And then after that, I was like, I'm new, I'm different, like let's go. And everything had completely changed. So it's just like we know that we need to do this. And as soon as you actually allow yourself to sit back and relax, your brain like completely transforms. It was
Mm-hmm.
insane.
Yep. That I talked about that exact thing with my previous guest, Carrie, and we talked about how we're like as athletes, super type A, go, 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 so used to like constantly moving, and you feel this sense of guilt if you sit on the couch and binge a couple TV
Mhm.
shows. It's this guilty feeling of like, this isn't productive. But to flip the script, that is maybe what your brain needed, was to chill, sit the fuck down,
Mhm.
and then you can be that's filling your cup, and then you can go be re-energized to do the things that you need to do later, versus like you're pushing yourself, go, go, go. But it's hard. It's like it's so hard.
I feel like this is honestly, we're talking about it and I'm like thinking through it. I feel like I have to earn that. Like
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like every day
Yep.
if I don't get up and do something quote productive, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm like if I do one thing intellectual and then I have to do one thing physical and then I'll have earned my quota for the day and I can sit on the couch and have a glass of wine and watch TV.
Yep.
Bonkers. I'm 26, have free will and support myself. Like to do whatever the fuck I want. Like it's so stupid.
That is so on point. Like I do that every day. And there's that part of your brain that's like, oh, but that's really good, because then you're forcing yourself to like go grocery shopping or go for a walk or go work out and exercise. And then you earn this thing. But it's when you associate that with, if you don't do those quote unquote productive things and you still sit on on the couch and then you feel guilty about it, like that's
Mhm.
when it's a toxic behavior versus just being proud of yourself for doing something productive and watching TV. But
Yeah.
it's that's when it's toxic, is like feeling the need to earn it. If you
Oh
didn't earn it,
yeah.
you still do it and make yourself feel bad about it. Like that's when it's a problem, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like it's just like if I don't, I mean, I didn't grocery shop today and I'm sure I'm gonna go to bed and be like, that was like the only thing that I had to do today. So go me. Like it just we create these like expectations of ourselves. And I'm sure
Hmm.
this is like humans in general, but I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure athletes in particular, where I'm like, since I don't have an athletic standard to perform to, I have a human standard to perform to. And it's
Yeah.
like very basic. And when I don't do that, I'm like, failure, terrible,
Yes.
awful, haven't earned. I'll just like play a podcast while I fall asleep, no TV. Like just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
punishing myself. So
Yeah.
it's absolute madness.
Yeah, it's the punish, it's the guilt, and then like punishing yourself for
Mhm.
not doing it. Okay, I know we need to wrap it up soon, but like just this is sort of on a similar thought process. Is I think we've talked a lot about it, but just the identity too. And we've said it a lot on this podcast, but being a former athlete,
Mhm.
but how we can sort of like shift that definition of former athlete. But at my very first guest of this season of my podcast, I'm like so annoying about this, but she
I love
was
it.
so interesting. She said, if you move your body with intention and with care, then you're an athlete. Like you don't need to be on a team for a university or a professional team to be a quote unquote athlete. If you move your body with a purpose and intention, you're an athlete. And if you consider yourself an athlete, you'll treat your body better and be nicer to it. So I don't know if that resonates with you or if that is like on the same train of what you're thinking.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. And I Googled, like I just like Googled define athlete and it's
Okay.
exactly that. It was like participates in organized sports or moves like or does
Moves
something
itself.
physical like or does anything physical. So it's just like this broad definition that we really niche down to like people who are competing at a certain level or are involved in like a certain level of organized sports.
Mm.
And I think that actually, now that we're talking about it, I think like referring to ourselves as former athletes is probably like pretty hurtful to the
Mm-hmm.
cause in terms of the conversation surrounding the transition.
Yeah.
And I would say too that I think that if I could wake up tomorrow and like reaffirm to myself that I'm an athlete, I think I would have a different day instead of being
Yeah.
like, I'm a former athlete, you know?
Ooh, I got chills.
I know. I think it's like kind of it's really interesting. Like I think if I go to the gym like I'm an athlete, it's way
Yeah.
different than like I'm a washed up like narp walking into
Yeah.
the gym to
No.
lift just to feel something kind of thing. Like I'm actually doing it like on purpose because I'm an athlete. Well, it is like a fundamental, like it's a
Mhm.
very fundamental aspect of your existence. Like
Yeah.
kind of what we were saying in the beginning, like we don't have to lose that. Like just because
Yeah.
we're not doing the sport every single day.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh
this
my
is
God. That's
interesting.
yeah, I know. I'm having an epiphany now too because
Yeah.
I just I'm gonna try that tomorrow. But yeah, because you are like I think back to when I was in college and playing D1 soccer and you're kind of walking around campus like not that we were any
Yeah.
good, like we were pretty shitty, but like
Yeah.
I still feel like hot shit. Like I'm an athlete on campus. Like it's this you feel like you have this sounds terrible, like this status, and especially not at my school, no one give a fuck. But just internally, you're like, I'm
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
Like I'm an athlete and I'm so proud of that. And then you think that you lose it and then you feel like you have no worth because that was your worth.
Yeah.
But if you now start saying like, oh, I'm an athlete because I go to core power, I move my body, and I'm in there like jumping jacks, down dog. I'm an athlete.
Look, I mean, if Google says it, then it must be true. Like,
The
but I mean,
definition,
the
literally
definition,
move,
yeah, it was like does something physical. Like it was like, did I have
moves
it up
body.
still? I know I lost it, but yeah, I know it was like is a participant competes in something like organized or does physical activity.
Me
Um,
getting out of bed hungover to get a bagel, I'm like, I'm moving.
to each their own, we need to be more specific if we're going to niche it down. I mean, like we viewed it as losing it, but like
Mhm.
we just don't do that aspect of it
Yeah,
anymore.
a different
God,
chapter, new season.
right?
We're in a new season.
Yeah, like a
Our
new,
career.
whole new season of life. I love that.
Yeah.
Our brains are insane, man.
Wow.
To wrap up that thought, I would say all of this conversation is a very good example of what the kind of dialogue that I want to be much more accessible
Mhm.
to athletes, not former athletes,
Yeah.
athletes.
Love it. Love it.
In addition to just kind of having resources to combat all the things that we talked about, and just like having, you mentioned when we talked, I wrote it down because I loved it. It was like recreating the community aspect of being on a team and like the accountability aspect and just kind of recreating that feeling. So hopefully next time we talk, I'll have a much better idea of where we're going with this.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and like giving me this exposure because it's super, super helpful and fun. This was
I
really fun.
know. I love this. This like gets me going. But yeah, exactly what you said. I remember that part of our conversation and it was one of the things that just like came out of my mouth because I was thinking through it. But why I think your idea is so brilliant is because for anyone who is coming from a sport that was either a team sport or like for instance an individual sport, but you're
Mm-hmm.
around people like you feel like you're missing your sport because you're no longer doing anymore. But I think the bigger piece of it is missing your teammates, your community. And we talk a lot about people in our 20s, 30s, whatever age you are, but how hard it is to make friends as an
Yeah.
adult out of school. And we had automatic friends and automatic sorority sisters is
Yeah.
what like we called our teammates. But no longer having that is a big piece of like your heart and your identity that you feel like you miss. So your idea is pretty brilliant to like try to recreate that again and give that for people.
Thanks. I appreciate it. When I initially like set out for it and like started having these conversations, I had an idea of like a program physical wise. And it like
Mm.
honestly, a big part of our conversation that we had made me realize it's not just about the physical activity of it all, just like you're saying. Like it's about like creating the community.
You just saying that made me realize I think people who are going to come to you for this program are obviously maybe they think they're initially coming to you for a workout, but if they're coming to you, that means that they're most likely also going through what we've been talking about with the struggles with transition. It's not mutually exclusive. So
Yeah.
it's like if they're coming to you for a workout, I think there's something maybe deeper down because they realize like you're a space for what they think are former athletes. So maybe they are also internally going through the mental side of it as well. Right. Oh, wow. We could just write a dissertation, like you said, on this, but
I know.
talk forever. But this was awesome. Tell everyone where they can find you, follow you on the
Yes.
gram.
My Instagram is just Bridgette Schaal, but I'm gonna spell it because my mom hates me apparently and spells my name absurdly, but it's Bridgetteschal on Instagram. And soon to be coming, I have a website being designed for the resource slash brand. So look out for that. Hopefully coming in January or February. And then announcements will be on Instagram too in terms of the program. So
this is all. And people, where can they live, or do they have to be close to you, or can they be virtual?
I train all of my clients virtually. So I'm not affiliated with any gym in Charleston. It's all virtual. I'm totally accessible online. So DM me if you're interested in talking about anything sports-wise or personal training.
Woo! Love that.
Woo!
All right, cool. This is so fun.